Welcome back to Keepers of Our Republic, a weekly nonpartisan podcast talking to election officials and judges about defending the rule of law and free and fair elections, also known as how we keep a republic. I'm your host, Tate Fall. If this is your first time joining us, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button and join us here every week on Thursdays for these conversations. Today, I'm joined by an elections jack of all trades, Rebecca Anglin. Rebecca is currently the Director of Elections in Greene County, Georgia, and has served in nearly every election role at every level here in Georgia with over 20 years of experience. She also serves on several committees for the Georgia Association of Voter Registration and Election Officials, also known as GAVREO, to help share her deep expertise. Thank you, Rebecca, for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Tate. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's start off by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself, how you got into elections, and I'd also love for you to share the why you stay. Why do you keep showing up to work in everything that we've gone through here in Georgia?
Sure. So I was 16 years old. I started out as a poll worker. I loved the atmosphere. My mom had always been a poll worker. My grandfather was a poll worker. My daughter has since become a poll worker. I say once it gets in your blood, it's there to stay.
Yeah.
So from 16 forward, I think I have worked every single election in some capacity in the state of Georgia. And I just love it. I love the people. I love checking in voters. I love the excitement around election time and the excitement that voters have to come out and cast their ballots. And I say, people fought and died for our right to vote. And so I think it's super important that people come out and exercise their right to vote. And I love it.
I love it. I totally agree. I think once you start, you can't stop. It's either elections is one of those things you either love it or you quit. There's no in between.
Yes,
And so it gets in your blood. And I love that. And I love that it's a
so
family
true.
affair for y'all. And I think that that's so special.
Yes, absolutely.
So tell our listeners a little bit about Greene County, how many voters you have, number of precincts, staff members, anything unique about your county, just so we have an idea of what Greene County is like.
Sure. So Greene County is very unique. We're lake country. We have Lake Oconee, which is a booming area that people seem to be flocking to, retiring to. Everybody loves the lake and the atmosphere here. We are very diverse. Greene County, you see things from extreme uber wealth to poverty. So we have a really, really diverse county here. Our voter population is about 17,500, give or take. You know how those numbers fluctuate a little bit. I'm super proud that we only have around 800 inactive voters here, which has
Wow.
changed a lot. When I first started here, we were upwards of 2,500, and we have really gotten our voters educated. We put out all kinds of social media posts, newspaper ads, signs, letting people know, hey, it's time to vote. So I really, really love that our voters are showing up to the polls and coming to vote. We have four polling sites here in Greene County on election day, and we have one advanced voting site, which is at my office, which I really, really love too, because we have such a great space here. Our county commission has been so wonderful to work with and has given us so many resources. So we're able to get voters in and out effectively. And I call us the Chick-fil-A of voting. I'm like, it's our pleasure,
I
and we're
love it.
happy that you came out to vote.
I love it. Now, if you start serving Diet Coke with the good eyes, I'm sure your
Uh,
numbers would boom.
I wish we could. I'm a Coke Zero girl.
I love it. I love it. And I know we know what inactive voters are, but for our listeners who are listening and remember that every state is different, right? What inactive
Yes.
means here is different in other states. But tell our listeners a little bit about what inactive voters are and why it is abnormal to have that low of a number for a county your size, especially a county where so many people are moving.
Yes. So inactive voters are voters that have not voted for the last 4 years or reached out to our office in any capacity. So they have not updated their driver's license. They haven't made any contact at all with our office, or they haven't cast a ballot. So I work really hard on trying to keep that number low, because I'm like, if you're registered, you need to be voting. I
Yeah.
have voted in every election since I was 18 years old, whether there was a question on the ballot or it's a presidential election. I think it's so, so important for people to know the responsibility of voting.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think that that's great to see because you do see, and it's not just one age group, it's all age groups of people who will vote maybe every presidential, only every, sometimes every other presidential,
Right.
And so to see that you have such an active electorate, I think speaks to the work that y'all are doing in Greene County.
Thank
And
you.
it's amazing. And so one thing I want to talk about too is your experience. So you've worked at the Secretary of State's office, you're at the county level, you've been a poll worker. And since most of our listeners are voters, they probably don't understand how those things are all so different. So can you explain to them kind of the differences in the levels of election administration and what that looked like for you?
Sure. So when I started out as a poll worker, I started out as like a check-in clerk, meaning the voters, and we had paper back then.
Yes.
I'm giving away my age. So we had a paper electors list that was in this huge binder, big stacks, and you would flip through, look up the voter, check them in, mark what ballot style they wanted if it was a primary. The voter would sign, and then they would move down the line. So I was kind of the first point of contact when a voter. Nowadays, I would be the poll where the no ink poll books are. I would be a check-in person because I'm a talker by nature. I'm a people person by nature. And so that was like my favorite job at a
I
polling
love it.
site.
Yes.
I went from that to managing an advanced voting site in Oconee County, which is the county that I live in. Loved that, loved being, I'm also a leader by nature. And so I love the leadership role, and I really found a niche for me. And I'm like, hey, this is something that I'm really devoted to and interested in. In 2019, I started working part-time at our elections office. I was hired on to learn the Dominion voting equipment and the no ink poll books. That was my baby. I was the keeper of that. I wanted to know everything about it and all the ins and outs and how this worked, and I wanted to be the best that I could be.
Yeah.
And so started out in that role, really enjoyed it, decided that I wanted to work full time, so went full time. The elections director in Oconee County was moving on to a different job in the election world with a vendor. And I applied for her position, and I was hired on as the director and board chair. Very different role.
Yeah.
So then you start managing all the things and start reading the code book like it's a Bible, and learning all the ins and outs and state laws. And I was just like a sponge. I wanted to absorb it all. I was so into learning, and I'm like, the only person in life you're in competition with is yourself. So you better be the best that
Yes.
you can be.
Yes.
And really enjoyed that role. I enjoyed getting to know the people. I enjoyed getting to know people at the state. When I was in Oconee, I was invited by the Secretary of State's office to be part of an advisory board. And I went to my first meeting, and I thought, okay, I'm going to tell them everything that is wrong.
Yes.
How do we bridge the gap between the state and the counties? I went to that meeting, and nobody was really speaking up. And I thought, it's your girl's time to shine. I'm just to tell them.
Yes.
So, started out the meeting and just kind of went through and told them, hey, this is what you need to be doing. This is how we mend the relationship. This is what we need to do after the rollout. This is how we better things. And before I got home that day, they had called and offered me a job. And I'm like, whoa, I don't think I wanted to be the one to fix it, but
Yeah, that's your job. I'm telling you what to do.
yes, exactly. And so it was a very, very tough decision for me, to say the least, to leave the county and go to the Secretary of State. But I thought, you know what? If I can do a little bit of good and help these counties out from a state level, that's what I want to do. So I was hired on to implement Jarvis, our voter registration and information system. And when I say long days and hard work, I've never been a part of a project that was that big, and I probably never will in my lifetime. It was a once in a lifetime kind of thing. So once Jarvis got off the ground and we were in a good, stable position, a few of my good friends knew that I wanted to be back county side because poll workers and election officials are my people. That is where I thrive, and that is what I love. And so the Greene County election director was retiring, and she called and said, why don't you come interview for this? I think you'd be a great fit for it. It's a neighboring county to where I live. So did a couple of interviews and came in toward the facility and fell in love here. And it's been history ever since.
I love it. I love it. And it's so
Thank
interesting
you.
because the every state is different, like we've said. And in Georgia, we have some things that are top down, like our machines, like you mentioned. You were part of the team that helped roll out at the county level and helped learn about all the new equipment because we changed to poll pads and we were changing voting equipment. And so that was purchased at the state level, but then we're also a home rule state. So there's a lot of things at the county level that are administering the elections. And then in some counties, the cities do their own elections. I talked to Travis about that. In other
Yes.
counties, they don't. And then you have other states like where I came from in Virginia, where every county bought their own election equipment and the
Wow.
state had nothing to do with that process. And then you have states like Louisiana where the Secretary of State buys everything for them. They do all their LNA testing. They do all of these things. They buy their seals. I mean, they do everything for them. And so it's really interesting. I think it's important to remind our listeners to learn about your state specifically, because it is so different. And if you hear something, on the news, if it or on Facebook or wherever on TikTok, to make sure like, hey, is that actually how we do things here? Because it is so different. And I think you
Yes.
got such a great snapshot of those levels working, and I love that.
Yes, I love that too. And it is so true. I preach voter education because it is so different. And like you said, when you're talking to people, they're like, oh, well, that's not how we do it in my state. Or, and I tell people, you've got to find out how you do it in your state.
Yeah.
What you do in one place is not necessarily what we do here in Georgia, or what you do one county over doesn't necessarily work for my county because you've got a larger voter population and I may have a smaller or a medium
Right.
sized county.
Right.
So there's a lot of dynamics that come into play.
It
And
is
if you don't
absolutely.
like something or don't know something, I'm like, you need to be a poll worker.
That's exactly right.
You need to serve.
Yes. Yeah. And I think you see, and that's what I love. And when I was in Virginia, we were a small office, there's only 7 of us.
Mhm.
So when the early voting workers went to lunch, I was the one that was checking voters in, even though I was the deputy director. That was my job, is to fill in
Yes.
when people needed it. And I loved it because like you said, you get to see those voters and you get to celebrate first-time voters. You get to celebrate voters returning from, military members returning from living overseas and voting in person for
Yes.
the first time in a decade. And that I think is one of the reasons why we love what we do, is to see that, and it's I always have, this juxtaposition. I remember in Arlington, I had my best and my worst day was all in one day. And we were there
Oh.
and I was working early voting and we were implementing ranked choice voting for the first time. And we were the only county to do ranked choice voting in Virginia. We were the first. So we were totally on our own. I mean, we didn't have any resources. We created our own education, our own voter outreach. We did it all. And someone came back to the office. I think the director must have been at a meeting because someone came and got me and said, there's a guy yelling in the voting lobby. I said, okay. So I go out there and this guy is very upset. He had spoiled like 3 ballots because he couldn't
Oh my.
understand how to mark the ranked choice voting portion and it kept getting rejected. And he got so angry. He was yelling at me. He told me he's been voting longer than I've been alive and what could I tell him? And he ended up crumpling up his ballot and throwing it at me and walking out. And so
Oh
what did I
my.
do? I went to my office and cried like any normal person
Mhm.
would. And I had my moment and I kind of gathered myself. And then I went back out to check on the staff and I was fixing the educational materials. We had them on a table outside the room with all their ranked choice voting instructions in different languages. And I was kind of tidying the stacks. And I see a young gal and guy come out of the voting room and she's crying. And I was like, oh my gosh, what did my poll worker say to her? Like, what did they say to make this girl
What's
cry?
happening?
So I was like, is everything okay? And he said, "Oh, she's just so happy she just got her citizenship and this is the first time she's ever voted." And I started crying again, but it was different
Exactly.
tears. And it's at the end of the day, though, I serve both those voters the same way. I serve the
Absolutely.
guy who throws a ballot in our face the same way I serve a first time voter, whether it's a new citizen or a fresh 18-year-old or whoever it is. And I think that's what I hope voters know, is that that's why we show up, is for them.
Yes. I had a voter last year who was 103 and her daughter brought her to vote,
Gosh.
still getting around. I'm like, you are goals. You are who I want to be when I
Yes. Yes.
and I told it was one of my best days here. I'm like, can myself and my office staff please get a picture with you? Because
Oh,
I'm like 103 and still making it a priority. And her daughter was like, she wouldn't have it any other way. She did not want to vote absentee. She wanted to come in and vote. She wanted to be able to cast her ballot. And I'm like,
yeah.
it just means so much when you see voters like that and those citizens. I love it when they come in with their naturalization papers and they're so excited to vote.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is the way that every single one of us should show up to vote. Like,
Yes. Thank
this is
you.
my right. I am here. I am getting to cast my ballot. I always go on a Saturday of early voting to cast my ballot and was able to do that this past Saturday with my grandmother for the first time. I've
Oh,
never taken her to vote. But just those moments of, hey, this is why we are showing up to do what we do.
yeah. Oh, I love that. What a beautiful story. Oh my
Yes.
gosh. Oh, I love that. So speaking of all the amazing things you're doing in Greene, I know we've talked about so many of the fun things that you have done there. And in your short time there, you've already won the coveted Eagle Award, which is a statewide award. So tell our listeners about the work you've done in Greene County and where you've seen kind of the biggest changes and improvements.
Sure. So, what I love here, I have changed a lot since coming here. I am a work smarter, not harder kind of
Yes.
person. So I
Yes.
think when people understand the why behind what they are doing, they work better for you.
Mm,
So poll worker training, poll worker education, really reducing down the amount of things and stuff we're sending out to precincts. Do we need to be sending all of this? Because I think a lot of times people's brains get overloaded and they're like, oh my gosh, they're in a panic when they see all these boxes arriving or all this
yeah.
material. And they're thinking, I can't do this, or I'm going to mess this up, or
Yes.
I don't know what I'm doing here, and the setup of things. Our poll workers set up our election day sites. They are the brains in the operation. Well, I'm a little bit of the brains, but they are the operation. They're my worker bees. They're getting the things
Yeah.
done for me. So really reducing down the amount of stuff that we were sending, making them
Mm,
more confident in what they were touching and doing, explaining why you are doing this, all of the checks and balances in place. This is
yeah.
what has to balance to this, that
Yeah.
has to balance to this. Being very transparent with everything, encouraging poll watchers.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, oh, I don't want them here, or that annoys me. I'm like, bring them on. I want people seeing. I'm actually annoyed when people don't show up because I'm
Yes.
like, why are you not watching this?
It's like throwing a party and no one shows up. You're like, I did
I've
all
done all
this.
this
I
work
did
and I
all
want you
this.
to see it.
Exactly.
So encouraging that transparency, encouraging people to show up and observe the process, watch what we're doing, see that there is nothing nefarious going on here. Another thing that I do in Greene County, we do 100% audit of every single election.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really important with transparency. Picking a race to audit, making sure that that hand count matches your tabulated results. I have been conducting audits since 2020, so 6 years now. Most of those audits have been 100% audits, and our results every single time match 100%. And so I'm very, very proud of the work that I've done here, the work that I did in Oconee, did these same type of things. And we're not seeing anything that does not match up. And so
Right.
really, really proud of that. And just overall proud of what we have here. I've changed things with the advanced voting room. Vendors have been wonderful. You see things at conferences that you're like, oh, we need that here. Oh, that would make something so much better or easier for our electors that come in. And I think that's really, really important too. Staying on top of trends, staying on top of new equipment, staying on top of new things that are available. To make that voting process easier in our county for those coming out.
I love that. And that's why I love going to conferences. Like you said, you come back and you learn from the presenters, of course, but you
Mhm.
learn so much in the conversations you have over coffee break or at dinner because, of course, we're crazy election people and we don't talk about anything else at dinner.
Right.
We're still talking about what we learned that day, and that's how you learn new ideas, and you can see like, okay, well, they're a huge county, but how could we scale that to be, something that could work for us or vice versa? And so I think it's so important to go and learn, and it shows our voters that we care. We're taking time away from our families to go to a
Yes.
conference to learn and grow and better our voters, and I love that.
Absolutely. And one thing that I love doing is going and touring other counties' facilities. Like,
Yes.
it's amazing to see like large counties and how they operate in our metros and what they're doing and security and all the things and saying, oh, that might work here. And then going to these smaller counties. I've been to counties that are every size all over the state of Georgia. Even seeing what they're doing and being like, oh, that's great, or I love that you did this, I love this sign you posted, I love the way you created this. I'm taking that back and doing that. So networking is a huge aspect of it.
Absolutely. I totally agree, and it's a lot of fun too to
Yes.
have those conversations. So as you said, you've been started off as a poll worker, indoctrinated at 16, and you've worked county, state, back to county. What advice would you give to anyone who might be thinking, now people are actually choosing a job in elections? What advice would you give to people who are thinking about jumping into elections full time?
Do it. So I truly do. I do think that you have to be a people person to do this
Mhm.
job. I think it's really important because, like you said, you either love it or you hate it. You're either going to stick with it and stay with it probably for life, or you're going to get out when times get tough.
Yeah.
I say anybody who worked elections and made it through 2020, you're the real deal. You are the strong
Yes.
ones. You are the ones that are going to make it in this world. I think it's really important for us to try to get a younger generation involved. Try to get these people who are getting political science degrees that want to say, where does this play out? What am I going to be doing for a career? To give us a try. And I tell everybody, be a poll worker. That's the greatest example of how to help us and how to keep our democracy. Once they come in as a poll worker, I think it kind of does get in the blood, and you say, okay, I really enjoy this. I really
Yeah.
enjoy this aspect of it. How do I make a career out of this? What is required of me? And I'm like, you don't have to have any type of degree to do this job, because I'm like, the things that I know and have learned, they don't teach you in a classroom.
Oh,
You
no.
learn by fire in this world.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that's really important. Just like we need our HVAC people, just like we need electricians and plumbers and all the things. We can't all be doctors and lawyers. We
Yeah,
need our election workers and our election officials. So I would say do it.
absolutely.
When I started out as the director in Oconee, I was not slated but to have maybe one election that year, and I had five. And I'm like, oh Lord, no better way than just throwing me in a frying pan.
Baptism by fire. Yep.
But that was the best way for me to learn
Mhm.
my job. And looking back, I'm so thankful that that happened to me. I'm like, I really got in there in the weeds, was putting in all the hours. And that's truly how I learned to be great at my job, was just being tossed into it. And hey, this is what you're doing. So
I totally agree. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a more resilient group than election officials. I
I
think
agree.
regardless of what's been thrown at them. I mean, you mentioned 2020 administering an election during COVID. Some states elections were postponed, other states they weren't. Every state was so different and had different restrictions and what you could do and can't do. And
Yes.
sometimes thinking back to that, I'm like, whoa, we really lived through that. We really ran elections through that. That's
Mhm.
so wild. And then you have every state, different laws, different legislature coming out with new rules. You have Supreme Court rulings that could change everything. And so
Yes.
I think they just, election officials just roll with the punches. And it's because they
Absolutely.
don't show up for that. Like we said, they show up for their voters. So they'll do whatever they got to do to get the job done.
That's
And
right.
you're hard pressed to find that nowadays, I think.
Absolutely. It's some of the best people in the world.
I love
Truly.
it. Yes. Okay, final question.
Okay.
We've talked so much about so many fun things, but what is the one thing you would like for voters to remember as we head into such a busy, tumultuous election year?
That showing up is of the greatest importance, and to not cast a ballot is to cast a ballot.
Mm,
I'm like, you hear all the touches and the little quotes, and if you don't vote, you really did vote. And because if you don't show up to make your voice heard, somebody else is showing up in your place.
mm,
And so I just think it is so, so important to get voters to the polls. Local elections matter just as much as a state election, matter just as much as a presidential election. I want your voice being heard for all of those elections. If you just have a splost on the ballot, you need to show up and vote for that because that's affecting your pocketbook.
yeah.
If you are just voting for a commission race, show up for that. Those are the people that are making your hometown and your community what it is. Those are the people that are making the big choices for your county. Show
Mhm.
up to vote for that. This coming up this the May primary, I'm like, this is so important no matter what side of the fence you're on, no matter what political stance you take, which I hate politics, by the way. No matter what, I'm like, you are getting a brand new governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, brand new. There's no incumbents running. So I'm like, if you want to see true change, you better be showing up to vote. And then this fall, was when they will really be elected. I call this election the narrowing down, the picking your faves. So this fall, I'm like, people better show up. They better realize the importance of this election, but not only this election, every election, you're voting for something that is going to make a difference.
I love it. I could not have said it better myself. I think sometimes, especially here in Georgia, states where we have runoffs, people get so tired from voting. And, this is a long ballot. We have a long ballot here in Georgia. A lot of states' primary ballots are long, but that's because there's a lot of really important stuff on there. And it is
Yes,
important to vote the whole ballot, do your research, show up prepared. Like you said, I mean, those offices where you probably haven't seen ads on TV or you maybe haven't seen yard signs, those are the people that are gonna touch your lives the most, really, and
absolutely.
so you gotta show up, like you said.
Well, and one of the things that you just hit on, voter responsibility.
Mm,
I'm like, we can't take it all. There
yeah,
is voter responsibility. So, to those voters listening to this podcast, I really encourage them, like you said, when you come to vote, it should not be the first time you see a ballot.
mm,
You need to be viewing sample ballots. A lot of voters in Georgia don't know that you can print a sample ballot, mark it, take it into the booth with you. We put all of our ballots in our local Oregon local newspaper. Voters can mark those and bring them into the booth. I myself print a sample
yes,
ballot and
same,
mark it
same.
and take it because it's so much on the ballot
It
that you're not
is.
going to retain that. You're going to be like, oh gosh, who was I trying to vote for? You can't talk when you're in a voting booth. So you need to have those references. Can't use a cell phone, so you can't pull it out and look somebody up. Educate yourself. And we
Mm,
are a paper ballot state. So when you print that paper ballot, review, make sure you've marked who you wanted to mark. And at any point in the process, you change your mind or you
mhm,
don't want to vote for that person or you picked a wrong one. Up until the point that you have scanned your ballot, you have the right to change your mind.
that's
So
right.
I just think it's so important to be an educated voter as well.
I love it. I think that that's absolutely true. I think, unless your county is giving you hundreds of thousands of dollars to do voter education, it is tough. And so we have to really rely on our voters to do that work. So thank you for
Absolutely.
sharing that and making that clear. So thank you for joining me today. This has been so
I have
fun.
loved it. Thank
So
you.
good. And thank you for sharing your insights with our listeners. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. We will be back next week with another episode talking with more keepers of our republic.
If you like this episode, please share it on social media and tell your friends. It's the best way for folks to find out about us. I hope you'll agree that our guest is indeed a keeper of the Republic. If you want to learn more about how you can help keep our Republic, stop on over to our website, keepourrepublic.org.